everyone, it's me, Sean Capri. I'm glad you're here because you're listening to the most horsepowerful podcast on the internet. It's the Xbox Drive. I'm on a Skype call with my friend Ryan Turford. He's the man on the moose, and on our journey today, we've got questions from last week, we've got questions from this week, and Ryan probably played some games and I'm still recovering, so my voice sounds pretty awesome. So jump on into the Xbox Drive.
Greater than X.
Hello, Sean Capri.
Sometimes I need to be honest with you, Ryan Turford. Sometimes I come into this show not knowing at all what we're going to be talking about. So that's where I just default to. We've got questions, and the status of my throat is where that comes from. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well as well. Also, I didn't put it on the doc, but I'm going to surprise you with this question coming from the Discord. Yes, we're starting the show with a question because there's lots of questions on the show this week.
I like it a lot.
This one comes from TPR in the Discord, and he wants to know, Sean, how are you doing? And how are you really doing? Because he heard that, your voice is kind of raspy from listening to Nintendo Drive, and he wanted to reach out, ask how you were doing. So, Sean, how are you feeling? I know you've had the raspy voice yesterday on the Nintendo Drive, but how are you recovering, my friend?
I'm okay, thank you. That's actually very kind. I feel like I'm just like a big whiny baby over the last while, but I took a couple days off work, and like actual days off work, and that's been very nice. So I think I'm on the mend. My daughter also on the mend. And she, speaking of raspy voices, she's got this cute little like broken voice that is adorable. She's 3 years old, and she's like, I'm feeling better, but she sounds like garbage.
Yeah.
So yeah, we got hit with some nasties over the last week or so, but feeling better, feeling good enough to do this. And this is the highlight, man. When we get to do podcasting and people actually listen and they send in questions and we're playing games, like this is the best. So life is good, my friend.
It's the dream. It's the dream. I mean,
yeah, it really is.
Especially it comes down to something you always talk about before, where it's like, man, how do people actually talk about games without doing podcasting?
Doing a podcast, like how do you exactly like what is that life? You just play it and you're just, I guess that was fun. You move on to the next one, like the next Call of Duty. I don't know.
I mean, I can't even remember what that life was like now, especially with doing podcasts for as long as we have been doing podcasts, which is kind of crazy to think about. But enough about that. Let's get into the show proper. So, of course, let's clean the garage a little bit. So, folks at home, if you want to support the show, there's a number of awesome ways to do that. Number one, you can support us on your podcast feed of choice: Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify. We're on all the things. So, subscribe there. Of course, leave a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That totally helps the show as well. Also, if you're watching on YouTube and you're seeing our beautiful faces, of course, like, subscribe, share with all your friends, comment on the video, tell us, what's going on in the world of Xbox that you're enjoying. We would love hearing about that. And we have a couple drive-by shoutouts to get to, but I'll get to those in just a second. And last but not least, if you want early access to this and all of our shows, as well as some exclusive content, head over to Patreon, patreon.com/Yumi Capri is how you do that. Throw a little tip in the old tip jar and out comes content. So
you crush that, dude. Good for you. Nice one.
I've definitely been practicing because I want to get through it, quicker on each of these shows because I don't want the whole show to be just this. But anyways, let's move on. Let's get some of our friends in here from the YouTube comments from last week. We got two really good things, and one of them is actually a question for the show as well, but I thought this would be a good place to put this in here. So first one comes to us from Dupa on YouTube, and they say, as a hardcore GamePass holdout, in brackets for reasons, I have to say that you guys have finally convinced me to try it. Wow, was I stupid to hold out? What a value. The only downside is I haven't picked up my Switch in weeks. I got a backbone for my iPhone, bought a Series S, and all the things. This show and the Nintendo Drive are my favorite gaming podcasts, bar none. So first of all, thank you for the kind words, Lou. We really appreciate it, especially because obviously this is something that if you go over to Sean Capri's screen, you see all the time. You can redeem channel points to hear this, but Xbox Game Pass is the best
greatest
deal
value in gaming.
It's a
Destin Legary had a great tweet. He had this thing a while ago. Just how if you think this is ridiculous, like then you'd think the value of Game Pass is ridiculous too. And he did the whole like, if you think $70 billion is crazy for Activision, then check out the value for Game Pass. Man, it is absolutely crazy. First of all, amazing, and thank you. And also, Ryan, we just upgraded our influencer status. We just leveled up. Look at that.
We sold someone on Xbox Game Pass. It's officially
buying
happening.
all the things, the Xbox Series S, the backbone, like all the things. This is welcome to an infinite backlog of games, never ending. I don't know if it's in the news today, but like we just learned about that Shredders game, the snowboarding thing.
Yeah.
Coming to Game Pass. Looks awesome.
Oh no, they actually announced that a long time ago, but they announced that it was coming to PC as well in Game Pass.
Well, there you go.
So that was the announcement today, because they announced, when they first announced Shredders, they announced it was coming to Game Pass day one. So
I seem to remember, now that you're mentioning it, I seem to remember that. Yes. But welcome in. This community is so awesome. Like that's the thing. Every time somebody new comes on in, I don't know how we end up like how the same types of people kind of come on in. Everybody's wonderful. Everybody's very kind. TPR asking how I'm doing. That's the type of person. That's the type of community that we've got going on here, man. Very cool.
For sure. And the other one on YouTube comes from my brother Kyle on YouTube, and he has the question: with the inclusion of King in the Activision deal, do you think Microsoft would create a mobile gaming category of Game Pass similar to Apple Arcade, start out with King mobile titles and cloud streaming for a cheap price of $5 a month? Kyle, I'm glad that you brought this up, because this is something I didn't even think of at all. Like, I think this is a great idea, because Apple Arcade is something we've seen to be super successful on Apple. In particular, I know, for example, last year they had that game Fantasian on Apple Arcade, which I have not checked out yet because I don't really have an Apple device to really check it out on, but that game looks awesome. So yeah, like I would love to see kind of that idea from Microsoft, maybe kind of working with King there to kind of do like an Apple Arcade spin-off service of Game Pass. I think that would be pretty
Wouldn't
cool.
that be wild, man? Like for them, because it really is, you talk about monopolies, like there's one app store on Apple devices. That's wild, man. Like that's kind of crazy. And it is, like when I was talking to Bad Bit on the console war room, which is available as a Patreon exclusive for patrons at the $3 and up level, I kept bringing Apple up actually in terms of who's going to be moving into the gaming market. And for whatever reason, this part of it that Kyle brings up, it was like blind to me. I kept thinking like, are they going to move into like some sort of like console piece or something? Because they've just got cash in there. I know that they're interested in gaming, but the Apple Arcade piece kind of flew by me, and I think that would be really, really interesting. I do think, I will say this on top of that though, is it can get a little complicated. It can be a little distracting, I would say is maybe the word. And I think Microsoft is doing a good job, as many irons as they have in the fire. I think they're doing a pretty decent job of staying focused. And just think back to the Xbox One, where they just wanted to dabble in TV and people ripped a shred off of them. So we'll see. Like that's the thing. Gamers are really particular about this sort of thing. You start to say mobile, it has a certain connotation to it as well.
For sure. But it's just one of those things where it's like, I think it's a different scenario when it's like an offshoot of what they're currently doing and it's not their focus, versus the Xbox One. Like the problem with that was the focus was TV.
Totally.
Not the ancillary thing that comes along with your Xbox, but the TV stuff. I think that's kind of the different scenario here. But you're right. There is definitely a separate mindset that comes along with that as well, because we are conditioned to expect, mobile games to not be very good or just be kind of trash. So yeah. Good question, Kyle. I'm glad that you threw that in there.
Download Punch Quest. If we're talking about mobile games, I just downloaded this game. It's a classic from like 2011, which is weird to call a mobile game a classic. That game is awesome. People should try it out. I'm
still obsessed with Fire Emblem Heroes. I played it literally every day for like 2 years. That game's great.
Was it Sexy Casino? Is that what people used to call it?
Kind of.
You never know. Yeah.
Anyways,
she's your sister, dude.
Let's grab our 8 tracks, pop them in. It is time for the playlist, because we played some games, or did we? Sean, your game playing thing is blank. So what did you play this week?
I downloaded Blu-ray player app on my Xbox and watched Interstellar with my wife. I haven't really played anything. I played Halo. I played a lot of, actually, that is the one thing. You know what I did? I did try Danganronpa for a little bit, but I've not been feeling very well, and I kept kind of like passing out when I play. It's not the game's fault. I've just been under the weather. So yeah, I watched Interstellar. I dabbled in that. I'm continuing to very slowly make my way through God of War on PC, and hope to be, at some point, just really fast track that thing. But nothing really of note to say, Ryan Turford, to be honest with you.
Nice. Blu-ray player, an excellent choice. I think there was an episode last year where I think that was the only thing I had in the dock too. So, there's nothing wrong with that.
It's I downloaded the app and it's because you put in the movie and it's like, you need to download this app. And the icon is like 14 pixels. Yeah. It's terrible. It looks awful. Like, what the heck, man? But,
I mean, you clearly haven't played a CD in your Xbox recently, Sean, because that the CD player app it's something else.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
I think I've gotten rid of all my CDs, but yeah, I was actually excited to put in the Blu-ray because we decided we wanted to watch Interstellar. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, right there with Armageddon, of course. And I thought it was on Netflix. It wasn't on Netflix. And I'm like, do I actually want to go into our Blu-ray collection and pull something out there?
Yeah.
Then I realized it's only Blu-ray, not even 4K. Ryan, I just want to collect all the things.
Well,
what does it matter with me?
As someone who collects a lot of 4K Blu-rays, Sean, because that's actually kind of my thing now. Like, they're great. And I actually keep them around. I actually watch more Blu-rays, like more physical movies than like stuff on Netflix and stuff like that. Especially because I don't even have like an active Netflix subscription. I basically sign up for it when there's like enough stuff on there that I want to catch up on to kind of go watch. So there you
go. Man. What about you? What have you've actually played games, I think.
I only played 2 quick games. I'll go zoom through them. Danganronpa, I talked about it on last week's show. Nice. I finished it. I'm actually pretty close to 100%ing it.
Oh my God.
I'm going for I think I'm going for the 1,000 gamer score. I'm pretty committed to getting it. And I think I can actually get it probably by next week's show. So I finished it. Again, I've played Danganronpa a bajillion times. I love that game. It's great, but you definitely have to be in the right mood for it because it is a visual novel and there's a lot of reading. So you have to be in the mood for a lot of reading.
Is it on PC Game Pass as well? Because I feel like that game might be better with a mouse.
Yep. It's on PC Game Pass as well.
I didn't realize like how much like movement there was around like, and like looking at the environment or selecting the character you want to talk, like you're basically moving like a Destiny style cursor around. Yeah. And with a thumbstick and with a gamepad, like I don't know if I like that as much as maybe if it was on PC, which I own actually. I bought before this came to Game Pass.
Well, actually, so like the Vita version's really good too for that way because it allows you to use the touchscreen, especially for some of the trial stuff, which actually really helps with the controls too. But yeah, like I think PC is probably a better place to put it. It's just a matter of, do you want to sit at your computer and basically read?
That really is it. That's what I'm facing with God of War. Yeah. It's like, do I really want to be playing this on my PC? Yeah.
For sure. And then other thing, Hitsune Miku Logic S Paint. This came to the store this week. Oh,
that's the Game Pass one from last week? Is that the one we talked about?
No.
What was that?
Taiko
you even
Drum
had to tell me. What was it?
Taiko Drum Master was the game I talked about last week, which is actually on Game Pass the day you're listening to this on the 27th. But no, so this is actually, so I actually fell in love with Sudoku over the Christmas break because, or
like
not
the number
Sudoku,
game?
I meant to say Picross. That was the one I meant to say.
Oh, okay.
For some reason I said Sudoku. I don't know why. I crossed the wires that way. But I fell in love with Picross on the Switch with the Sega Genesis Picross game that they did over the holidays. So I've been looking for maybe a new Picross fix, and Hitsune Miku Logic S Paint certainly came around at the right time because it's a Picross game on Xbox with Hitsune Miku music. So if you're a fan of Hitsune Miku, if you like Picross, I think you're really enjoy this game, and it's cheap. So you're a real special person, Ryan. Yeah. I mean, what did you expect from me, Sean?
I mean, look, I want to say that if nothing else, people can expect diversity of games to be covered on this podcast. I'm going to be playing God of War on a PC, which is a PlayStation game, with my Xbox controller, and Ryan's playing some Picross thing.
To be fair, I'm also playing Redacted, which I'll tell you about later. So there.
The heck is that?
It could be anything, Sean. It could be anything. All right, let's slam the brakes on this conversation. It's time for some breaking news because we got to get through this stuff. So, of course, first news story I wanted to kind of zoom through, but I thought we had to at least acknowledge it here. Halo Infinite has officially surpassed 20 million players across PC and console. Also, at the same time, Forza Horizon 5 has hit 18 million players. This is pretty huge news. Obviously, with Halo, I think it's less huge, even though it's a bigger number. It's a free-to-play game, so in theory, anyone can jump into it without having to pay a dime. But Forza Horizon 5 hitting 18 million players, that's pretty impressive for a paid title that you that even if you don't buy the game, you still have to buy a Game Pass subscription for. So, Sean, what do you think about this news, and how awesome is this for that Xbox is kicking butt here?
Xbox, I want to say this about Forza, and we'll jump to Halo in a moment. Forza represents a first party, and Sony does this as well with Gran Turismo, but a first party effort to a sports type of game. You don't usually see like a whole lot of highlight and feature around like an NHL or Madden or FIFA. Like they happen, and of course those games are massively popular, but you don't really hear podcasts cover them or really anybody. Like somehow they're silently ridiculously successful. Mm-hmm. So this is actually really nice to see from Microsoft that this is a racing game. It's not a MOBA, it's not an MMO, it's a racing game, it's a sports game. So huge kudos to them. You're exactly right that this is a paid game, whether you got it on GamePass that you paid for, or you actually paid for the game, and speaks to all the things that they've been doing right lately, which is putting games on day and date on Game Pass, putting them day and date on Steam and all this PC stores and everything. I think that is massive. And I'm right there with you on all the Halo stuff. So I'm just kind of echoing your points. This is big numbers, big news. We haven't heard anything like this from Xbox in a long time, that they have a lot of people playing their games. And I like that they've been at this long enough that we don't like tear down the numbers like, oh, well, they're not talking about sales or anything. Like this is just the number. Yeah. And it seems to matter. It seems to be a big deal. And just wait to see when everybody else does the exact same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Not only that, but I don't think we talked about it on NPD on last week's show, but Forza Horizon 5 was also the 19th best-selling game from last year, which when you when you look at the other titles as far as how well they sold, like I think a lot of people actually bought Forza and didn't play it on Game Pass, just play it on Game Pass as well. So I think the sales are probably actually pretty high for that game as well, which is just really impressive to see for a racing game. Although I will say that obviously I do think the racing genre in general does pretty well for certain titles, especially Gran Turismo over on PlayStation, because that series in particular is like one of the best selling all-time franchises for PlayStation. So, but we didn't really hear those numbers from Forza. That's all. Like previous.
It reminds you of a time when like when Sega would really push forward sports games. Yeah. Like then that was probably the last time that you really had like a first party. Didn't Microsoft have some first party sports stuff? Did they do like tennis or something?
They did that because EA wouldn't basically allow them to do Xbox Live support. So Microsoft had to create their own sports series, stuff like Lynx or Top Spin Tennis and stuff like that. Were
you have to imagine you'd have to imagine that they would. Everybody just wants that EA monopoly, like their stranglehold on sports games just to go away, because 2K was obviously really great at them. And I think they're coming back with like golf. Really, I think that'd be interesting to see how Tiger Woods does against the Masters later on this year. But yeah, this used to be a bigger thing. Like sports games are massive. They have a huge impact on sales and revenue. So yeah, I'd love to see that for Forza. Just clearly not a niche thing. Like if you just listen to podcasts and if you form your entire opinion on like who plays sports games, you might think like just a bunch of racing dorks. And it's like it's so ubiquitous with gaming. It's much more commonplace than people might think.
For sure. All right. Next news story relates to a lot of the stuff we talked about on last week's show, because of course we've been getting more and more information about the Activision deal. And in an interview with the Washington Post, Phil Spencer, when asked about Activision's IP catalog, Phil stated that he'd love to revive some of Activision's past IP, and specifically talked about, series that he really enjoyed in the 90s and the 2000s that haven't gotten much love, especially. And he had name dropped 3 specific series in particular that he'd love to revisit. King's Quest, which we know recently had like a Telltale game series style game associated with it. Guitar Hero, which the last game in that series was Guitar Hero Live, and Hexane with a capital X. That game goes all the way back to like the N64 era, or like old school PC with games like Heretic and stuff like that. So before I get to the questions, because we had a lot of people actually write in about this, Sean, what's your take on Phil kind of name dropping some of these franchises? And do you think some of these are going to come back?
Guitar Hero, I think will. And especially as, man, like you just lock everything in with Game Pass, honestly. Like the ongoing nature of it, they could have that game live forever, truly. And I just don't know. I wonder like what the expectations were from Activision in terms of like, why did it fail? Like at what point did it really fail? And what's there's a purity to the original Guitar Hero games, 1 and 2, and maybe even 3 as well. where it's just you and a guitar and the music, and things got a little gimmicky, I would say, as time went on, with like there's like a slide thing that they put on the guitar and stuff. And yeah, man, like this is something that just it's another example of a game that I would say is almost like Microsoft Paint. Like it just come with the thing. It's just so anybody can enjoy it. I think this represents a bit of that Nintendo kind of strategy. The games for everybody. That's what the rhythm games really did. They brought in grandmas and parents and everything, brought the whole family together. And I think from that perspective, maybe that's why Phil might be looking at it as a strategic benefit more than even just a personal preference, I think.
Yeah. Well, especially like Guitar Hero Live in particular, like that game, I don't know if you've like seen footage of that game recently, Sean, but that game's real weird. Like I played it.
Well, that
recently because it was like an FMV
live footage
game. Yeah, which is just, it felt like you were playing like a Sega CD, like kind of like the InXS game that came out on Sega CD. But
you know what though,
like a modern form.
Can you imagine? And I don't like, they don't have a VR arm to Xbox at all, but I do imagine that like if you manage to, I don't know how many people play Guitar Hero and they still look at the guitar. Like I never did. I don't know if that's like a beginner kind of thing. You're looking at your finger, pressing the blue button or not. Yeah. But if you could do like a VR experience, like put you up on stage next to like Steven Tyler playing some Aerosmith songs, that would be rad, dude. That would be awesome. But I think maybe that's what they were going for with Guitar Hero Live, but I didn't really play it much more than, I feel like there was maybe like a demo or something at a Best Buy or something that I saw one time.
Because I was actually testing to see if my guitar still worked and stuff like that, because I'm getting ready to move soon and I'm kind of going through all my stuff to see what to keep and what not to keep. And I played it and I was actually amazed by how weird that game is. And the guitar is guitar for that game is kind of uncomfortable too, because they have, instead of the buttons in kind of a horizontal line, they have them kind of all bunched together.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And it feels like kind of like you're playing in this small kind of area and it feels kind of cramped. So
they try to make it more like an actual guitar.
Yeah.
They didn't need to do that at all.
No, it doesn't feel nearly as comfortable as, the Rock Band guitar that came with Rock Band 4, or even the older Guitar Hero guitars.
Yeah. So. Boo Rock Band. The Rock Band gear I didn't like at all. I preferred the Guitar Hero drums and the Explorer, the 360 guitar was the best guitar of all of them. That's my stance on that, Ryan.
Also, I'm going to quickly talk about Hexane, because I think that's a great franchise that should come up. First of all, because that franchise was actually, developed by id in the 90s, but they didn't keep the IP essentially. Like the IP, stayed with Activision. So that's one I would love to see come back. It's almost like medieval Doom in a lot of ways. So like in the same way that I would love to see kind of Quake get a reboot, like in the same style as like Doom 2016, I think Hexane could, do the same type of thing as well, where they could do like a reboot of it. And I think it would be totally awesome as well. And we even sold Donnie Reese on it, because I saw he was playing the N64 version the other night for the first time, trying it out.
That's awesome.
He said he loved it. So
do we have a question about this at all? Like, I don't know if there's about other games that we would bring forward.
So we have 3 questions about this, actually.
Okay, let's do that, because I was going to jump in other stuff, but let's do the questions.
So first of all, these kind of go in opposite directions, but I kind of want to read all 3 because they all kind of lead us to kind of asking the same thing. So first off, Delroy in the Discord asks,
what's up, Delroy?
The pending Activision Blizzard King purchase comes with not only a treasure trove of IP, but also a wealth of industry talented studio. What's on one IP you'd like to see resurrected under Xbox, and what studio would you like to see on it? I'd like to see StarCraft Ghost Reborn by High Moon.
Yes.
And then TPR asks, this is probably more of a Ryan question, but what are the chances that we see some legacy Sierra Entertainment games be made available in the future because of the deal? Sierra was acquired by Activision Blizzard in 2014, so it has me curious. Quite niche, I know, but it's fun to ponder. I'll touch on that a little bit.
I will touch on that also. Thanks for assuming, everybody.
Hey,
you and TPR.
Sean. Come on. To me. And then last one, of course, from Trucker Sloth, says, I spent hundreds of hours playing River Raid and Pitfall with my aunt on the Atari 2600 and 7800. I'd be the happiest man alive if Xbox were to reboot either one of them after taking over Activision. Are there any old franchises that any of the new acquisitions hold that you'd love to see come back and have a new life in modern times? So obviously all these questions had a common theme, which is what older franchise besides the ones that Phil mentioned would we like to see? Sean, what do you think about this? Do you have any in mind?
Okay. Man, yeah, tons. I mean, I've been there, like I've been playing PC games from the beginning, man. That's really where a lot of my history comes in. But I want to jump to a time and place where before first-person shooters were on console, you had vehicular combat games, Ryan Turford.
Yeah.
And two games come to mind for me. One is actually I played on PlayStation, Vigilante 8.
Yep.
And one I played on PC, Interstate 76, and its sequel, Interstate 82. I don't know if you know about those games, but the soundtracks alone are worthwhile you having those CD-ROMs, my friend. Those would be, I'd love to see them get back into, just a little vehicular combat. It would be super fun, man.
Especially because we know like that Sony's doing a Twisted Metal game that's going to be coming out along with the TV show. So like you just go head to head with each other. Like,
that was really it. It was like, I think, Twisted Metal kind of like kicked everything off. And then Vigilante, I don't know, is that a common thing? Like Neighbor Matt had, we played it over there at my friend's house growing up. But is that a popular game? I don't even know.
You'd be surprised how many comments I saw after they had mentioned that the takeover from Microsoft that people wanted to see Vigilante 8 come back. So I think there's some love for that game, especially because again, like it came out around the same time as I think Twisted Metal 2. So a lot of people bought one or the other, and there was like a rivalry going on with them back then. So like I think there's like a loyal fan base to that.
Nice.
So I don't think you're off base with that one, Sean.
Okay, I appreciate it. Where are you at with this? Because that's kind of where I'm at for now.
So I have a couple that I wanted to bring up. First off, going back to TPR's point, one franchises that I've wanted to return forever that came out in the early 2000s is No One Lives Forever. This was done by Monolith, the company that now does Middle-earth Shadow of War, but they also made the Fear games and some other stuff. And it was essentially like a spoof on like James Bond, but in video game form. And it was all the games were like super funny and clever and a lot of fun to play through, especially because they had like great stealth elements. And plus, like, how often do we see spy games nowadays? Like, it's not very often, especially since we stopped getting James Bond games or like the Bourne Identity games. So I think that's a franchise that could really come back in a big way, kind of like Perfect Dark's getting kind of rebooted in the same way. So that's one I would love to see kind of make its return. Another one Chucker Sloth actually pointed out, Pitfall. I think that Xbox could actually have their own kind of version of Uncharted, but with Pitfall, essentially, where it's like kind of like almost like an Indiana Jones spin-off in a way, but it's like starring Pitfall Harry, and it's a third-person exploration adventure where you go to like temples and stuff like that. Like I think that would be super cool.
I'd keep it 2D, honestly. I don't want the direct comparison to Uncharted. I feel like Tomb Raider is more interesting, honestly, and I think they could use a bit of a 2D thing. You don't need to overdo it with Pitfall. Just give it a little love.
So maybe you do more of like a Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure kind of sequel or spiritual successor in a lot What's that game,
is that a thing?
That was a game on Super Nintendo where they essentially rebooted Pitfall, and it essentially played like almost like something like Super Star Wars or something like that. It was really fun.
Oh, that's cool. Oh yeah, totally. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So there you go.
I feel like there's one thing we often talk about this question, or it seems like that's one of the primary things that comes up after this purchase. But I feel like just one and done. This catalog available on Game Pass, like the old games, like just available, almost like a GOG, good old games kind of thing. Just like that's what your Game Pass, at least on PC and wherever available. Just add those all in, man. All these old classic games would be awesome. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Going back to TPR's point, talking about the Sierra games and how he would love to see
just
them come
bring them back, like the actual games, not like we can get back into like making new games and refreshing and revitalizing the franchises, but like put the games there, man.
Like that'd especially, or they could even do something like they did with Quake, for example, where they kind of they contracted like Night Dive Studios, for example, to kind of make like a modern playable version of that game, but also just keeping it the same. They could do that with a lot of these franchises as well. Like even some of these smaller ones, like No One Lives Forever, for example. Like I think those games actually really hold up. But obviously they don't really run very well on modern PCs, or that's just hard to get them to play correctly. So I think they just need a few tweaks, and you could probably do that rather than, rebooting them completely.
Totally. Yeah.
Or even something like Hexane, I think would be cool too, to see like that. Cause again, it's an old id series game as well. So there you go. But yeah, like other than that, I would love to see maybe even them do like, maybe like Atari 2600 collections or something like that. Cause Activision, for example, was like one of the biggest publishers on Atari in particular. Like they were the very first third party essentially. So they made like half the 2600 library. So I would love to see maybe even them do like some collections or something like that.
Yeah,
and kind of bundle those together, kind of going back to kind of Trucker Sloth's point as well. So yeah, lots of stuff out there. And to Delroy's point, I mean, I would love to see StarCraft Ghost 2 because I mean, that's a game that
StarCraft overall, give that franchise $1 gazillion and just keep going with it, man. Like whatever StarCraft 3 is going to look like, or get outside of the real-time strategy genre, like that franchise alone is worth so much. Like you think about what they've done with Halo and just exploded that thing. I feel like StarCraft is on that level. Warcraft as well. Like they've only done World of Warcraft, and I don't blame Activision or Blizzard for doing that. But these properties are like just gargantuan. Like they are so huge. And I feel like what we'll be talking about in like 5 or 10 years is looking back on this moment and go, look what Microsoft was able to do with some of these already very popular franchises in a very similar way to looking at like, look what Disney just did with like Star Wars. That thing was like pretty quiet. You had maybe a couple of shows and obviously the prequels and everything. And people have varying degrees on whether or not the late movies were good or not. But they turned that investment of a couple $2 billion into just a massive thing. And Marvel as well. That Marvel's bankrupt at one point. Yeah. I feel like that we're going to be looking at the same thing with some of these big franchises, in addition to just this upholding of video game history. I often hear, and I'll just say this, Ryan, too, like I hear a lot about like what's Microsoft doing? They're just buying their way into video games. And I can't argue with that statement. But what I will say, and maybe alongside that, is thank God Microsoft is investing in old video games and keeping them, and they have the infrastructure and framework in place that you can go play these games. They're not going to be lost. And they're buying, like, this is the big franchise I just talked about. That's great. But the history that Microsoft now owns, and they will make sure it's not lost to the sands of time, is huge. And I don't know that we've done a good enough job celebrating that. And I just wanted to say that very seriously, Ryan.
Yeah, especially as for someone like me who is like a retro game enthusiast. Like I love to see kind of these games kind of getting preserved and maybe even coming back in a really interesting way. Again, they don't have to do like, big budget, sequels or reboots to some of these games. As long as they, make them playable, especially with some of the older stuff, to your point, like I think that's all they really need to do. So,
which I think many of them are. Like I just look at, and I don't know the inner workings of like good old games. Is there some sort of like wrapper that those games come in? Like a lot of those have been figured out already. It's just licensing, like who owns them and what availability are them. You would have to go buy them on all these various digital storefronts. Now it's just Microsoft.
Yeah. Now the only things they really can't go back to probably are some of the licensed stuff that Activision did, because Activision was known for doing a ton of licensed games, like the Spider-Man games on original Xbox,
Ultimate Alliance,
or the James Bond games on 360. There's a lot of stuff that Activision like holds the
Star Trek.
Yeah, there's that too. Like I think there's a lot of stuff that Activision did that we'll probably never see the light of day again because of the licensing. But I think there's a strong possibility we see a lot of this stuff come back as well.
Yeah, man.
Also, before we kind of move to everyone else's questions, because again, we've got a lot of questions from last week to kind of go through real quick. I didn't put it in our show document, but obviously there was the report from Jason Schreier that came out yesterday talking about the Call of Duty exclusivity. Obviously we don't talk about, rumors or speculation on the show. Yeah. But I want to touch on the fact that we at least saw that news, and Jason kind of goes through what he estimates the timeline is going to be for Call of Duty remaining on multi-platform things there. So definitely check that out. We have 18
months to talk about Call of Duty exclusivity and whatnot.
Exactly. So that's why I wanted to acknowledge it, because I'm sure someone's going to ask about it next week. So, all right, let's let the rest of our friends into the car with us. It's time for the carpool. We'll start off with the Muffin Mon on Discord. And again, a lot of these questions are left over from last week from the Activision Blizzard scenario. So he asks, do you think that this acquisition could save teams like Toys for Bob and Vicarious Visions, who were regulated to Call of Duty and Diablo support studios under previous leadership? It's sad to see two incredibly talented development teams treated this way after making amazing games like Crash 4 Insane Trilogy and the Tony Hawk remake. I think we talked about this last week on the show, but I absolutely think that this is totally going to save a lot of those studios, because I think Phil touched on this in his interview with the Washington Post, but his plan for a lot of these studios is to basically go to each one, visit them and say, hey, what do you want to work on? Yeah. And, supporting new ideas.
Good place to start.
Yeah. So, and then kind of
talking to them
things that way. So, Yeah.
It has to do with, I don't remember where we might have talked about this before, but it has to do with, is Call of Duty going to remain on an annual cycle that requires like 3 primary studios, Infinity Ward, Treyarch, and Sledgehammer? Are they still doing the exact same thing? If they are, then those studios are probably going to be required to support those 3 studios in their games. But if they do move towards more of a biannual or less type of release schedule, then yeah, you free up a lot of those support studios. They were put on Call of Duty because of that crazy schedule. When you think about like, man, they put out like sports games every year. They put out new Call of Duty games every year, and sometimes multiple. They also drop like Warzone, for God's sake. So you can't like keep what's been happening and keep all the and then disperse the resources. It's all related.
Yeah, I actually see in my mind that maybe they go to what Ubisoft did with Assassin's Creed. They go to that model where essentially there's 2 Call of Duty games every 3 years. Like I think that's kind of the scenario for what they do going forward. And then Warzone's kind of its own thing and has its own studios kind of supporting that. They'll want to do that. So that's what I'm imagining the future is, but we'll see. Next up, Jedi Master Ren on Discord asks, do you guys think that Xbox will utilize their other acquired studios to work on some of the IP that they'll gain from this acquisition? Not thinking Call of Duty, but maybe like a Crash Bandicoot from Rare or something like that. What Xbox studio would you want to see paired with a specific Activision Blizzard IP? So I'm actually going to steal an idea from this to kind of give Sean a second to think about this, that I actually saw on Twitter that someone tweeted about, which is I would love to see a studio like the Coalition or id Software, or even something like Machine Games. I would love to see their take on Call of Duty. I think that would be super interesting. Like maybe if Infinity Ward or Treyarch wants to go work on something else, like maybe one of them wants to go work on Hexane or something like that. Like what if you did that and then traded off and had one of Microsoft studios handle Call of Duty that year, whatever year that it came out? Like I think that would be like a super interesting idea. Like I would love to see like a machine game, but I would love to see like a Machine Games take on Call of Duty. Like that, what would that even look like? Like how interesting would that be? Like I would love to see stuff like that. But what do you think about this question, Sean?
Well, I think I might go the other way actually, because I feel like, people like to poop on Call of Duty quite a lot. But I think there's some of the best games around in terms of first person shooter. The mechanics are and they look so great. That machine works really well. I feel like it might go the other way. I might take like a Sledgehammer and give them Quake. Okay. Actually, that might be something I would want to do. I'm trying to think of like, because I just mentioned StarCraft as well. Like I would want somebody else to take on like a I might give StarCraft to In Exile and do like maybe a tactics based StarCraft game. Like I think you could do a lot with that kind of thing. Because StarCraft, obviously real-time strategy, turn-based would be interesting as well. But yeah, or Raven Studios, give them a first-person StarCraft game, or one of the Bethesda studios. I mean, who is it that's doing? Oh my gosh, Obsidian is actually not Bethesda, but sort of tangentially, it's Bethesda
Close
adjacent.
Enough.
I think you could give them something in the StarCraft world. Role playing, I think, would be absolutely incredible. It's kind of like where I'm at. I mean, like, there's so much here, dude. Like, we could honestly spend like an hour on this and mix and matching, and like I feel like we need like a whiteboard or like felt and stuff. We could mix like a logo with a franchise title and everything, like for some of these things. I mean,
well, luckily you've got a whiteboard right next to you, Sean. So
I want to use it, man. I really feel like this could be like kind of a fun thing to do on stream. Actually, it would be really interesting. Yeah. I mean, even like Playground, like I know a lot of these studios, the thing is that's hard about this is in the reality, most of these studios are spoken for. Most of these studios are already doing what we know, and they even have like a project afterwards, but in the fantasy world, we can just do whatever we want.
Also, I'm going to throw it out there as well. I would love to see Turn 10 instead of maybe after they're done Forza reboot.
That's funny.
Maybe they work on something like Blur from Activision. I don't know if you remember that game, Sean, but it was essentially it was essentially Mario Kart, but with like power modern cars. I
would actually, on that note, I would give, to my point earlier, Interstate 76 or Vigilante 8 to Playground. Okay. Like the makers of Forza Horizon 5, like give them a vehicular combat kind of game. And Interstate 76 is a game that nobody played. It's like this disco infused video game. Everybody's got like it's blaxploitation, like afros and all the clothes and everything is amazing. That would be super fun to had a great story as well. So yeah, give that to Playground Games. Why not, man?
Nice. Next up, Tyler Kopp on Twitter at AcidTK03 asks, what a big day yesterday, even though that was like a week and a half ago. Xbox is again the shooter box, and I couldn't be happier. Game Pass could and more likely will have the top 4 shooter franchises: Halo, Battlefield with EA Play, Overwatch, and Call of Duty. Yeah. Game Pass sub for life. Again, that's more of a comment than a question, but yeah, I think like that's why like if they wanted to take like any of the franchises that Activision has, any of the shooter IPs that they have, like Microsoft has a ton of studios that can take a lot of those over, which I think would be super cool to kind of see them kind of mix and match some of that stuff.
Do you feel like the EA stuff gets lost in a lot of this? Like the EA Play is baked into Game Pass, at least if you have Game Pass Ultimate. Like maybe that's the thing that ruins it is like it's for most people, I would imagine, have Game Pass Ultimate. It's not for everybody. But like we just talked about how popular sports games are. Like sports are baked into Game Pass like this, man. Well, at least to a certain extent. Yeah,
they're not day and date or anything like that, but you're right. They're definitely baked in. I mean, I imagine since the Super Bowl is coming up, we'll probably have Madden from last year in Game Pass pretty soon, as well as, NHL and stuff like that too. So
yeah, man.
Yeah, I think it definitely gets lost sometimes in the shuffle because we just don't see too many updates from EA Play. I think that's the difference between that and Game Pass, and why we see this disconnect from it, because Game Pass, you're seeing multiple updates a month for the service, but like EA Play basically adds a new game to it like once every like 2 months, essentially. So.
I mean, It Takes Two is probably the most recent one of note for me.
Well, no, Mass Effect.
That's right.
That was just like last week. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right. Next up, Trucker Sloth on Discord has a second question asking, do you think Sony had any idea this deal was going down beforehand, or do you think they were blindsided like the rest of us? If they were surprised, what do you think their initial reactions and thoughts are? Now, I talked about this on the PlayStation Drive with Matt last week, and we talked about kind of PlayStation's kind of perspective on things. So I'm not going to talk too much about it. But I curious to know what you think about this, Sean.
Well, I think something that came out of some of the reports was that Activision at one point was like, maybe we should sell. And it seemed like maybe a couple companies, a couple suitors might have understood that they were looking to maybe sell. And I don't know if they would have gone to PlayStation. I feel like that's just completely out of their wheelhouse in terms of the cash offer anyways. But that would be the only way that they would find out, like it happened very quickly as well. But I feel like the only way would be some sort of formal, hey, Activision goes to PlayStation and says, hey, like we're thinking about this. But otherwise, no, like they find out when we find out, I would say.
Yeah, I imagine that there was probably like that's why we saw some of those tweets where Phil Spencer was like, yeah, I just got off the phone with Sony. We calmed things down and Call of Duty is going to be there for a while kind of thing. So I imagine this kind of blindsided them a little bit. Or if they found out about it, it probably was like not very long before it was announced. So
yeah, that tweet was really interesting. They did a great job on Iron Lord's podcast breaking down that tweet from Phil about the desire to keep games on PlayStation. It's like it's saying a lot. It's actually very loaded. And you have to imagine something like that was vetted by all the lawyers, all the PC people, the PR people, because you can't make a promise anything.
Well, like, especially you can't make a promise before the sale goes through. I imagine kind of like when they kind of do the sit down, the Activision sit down, kind of like they did with Bethesda when the deal was official. I imagine that's where they talk about that stuff more. But yeah, the quote unquote desire to remain on PlayStation is, well, we'll see about that. But
yeah.
Again, I talked about that on the PlayStation Drive in more detail.
Subscribe.
Exactly. Next up, Andrew Semichek had 2 questions for us on Discord. He asked, what do you think comes first, a Smash style game or a Mario Kart style game with all the mascots that Microsoft owns? Shot, what comes first, Smash Brothers style game or Mario Kart style game from Microsoft?
I don't want either. I actually want something else, but do I have to choose between those two?
I mean, you have to choose. Andrew's asking us.
I mean, the Smash clones are coming out like left, right, and center, man. Like we saw it with Nickelodeon. We were seeing it with it was a WB. What's the next
Multiverses that's coming out soon.
Yeah. So I feel like that's people seem to understand that and they get it. Like maybe it's a new genre. But yeah, I mean, I want them to do something different. I don't want to see like do what Sony does, do what Nintendo does with Smash. Like I want it differently for a variety of reasons. Maybe the most potently is like when it looks like when you try to do something that somebody else has done. And by the way, like has established the standard in both of those cases. Mario Kart, I'm sorry, Ryan, that is the gold standard for kart racers. Yeah. Smash is the gold standard for whatever the hell you call that. Like come up with something, come up with the next thing. Don't do a fighter. Don't do any of those things.
So yeah, to your point, I'm also in the same boat. I don't want to see this because we saw kind of, Nickelodeon try and do this and kind of fail miserably with these. Like even though Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, I think is probably a fun game. Like it just did not sell. So ultimately, if I had to choose, I would say probably a Smash style fighting game. But ultimately what I really want is just reboot Fusion Frenzy. And instead of having the dumb Fusion Frenzy characters in it, have all the Microsoft characters in it instead. And just
super interesting.
Do like a mini game collection that has all the characters from all the universes, but then still just call it Fusion Frenzy.
Yeah.
Do it that way. I think that's what they should.
I mean, if you could tie into something that already exists, maybe, and this is not a unique idea to me. I think somebody else has said that at least once before, but put all the characters into Warzone. Yeah. Compete with Fortnite on that front.
Or what they could do, I heard this one on Twitter too, I didn't want to bring it up as my choice, but like bring back Heroes of the Storm. The Blizzard, MOBA game, but instead of just the Blizzard characters, you bring in all the characters from all. Oh my God, IPs.
That's nuts!
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, and you don't even have to limit it to one game. You can see like all these kind of characters showing up all over the place. Put some characters in Killer Instinct. Put some skins in Halo. Like let them be a little bit fluid, especially in the multiplayer stuff. Like who cares, man? Have fun with all of it.
Yeah, exactly. And then his second question, of course, what do you think is one crucial area that Xbox is lacking in now that needs to be improved for them to keep positive momentum going? So this actually, I think my answer is going to tie into like Court LeBlanc's question, which is coming up. So I'm going to save my answer. So Sean, what do you think about this question?
It seems like they're pretty well covered from a genre perspective. I think what they need to do is convey that when you see that it's an Xbox Game Studios game, that game is awesome. That game is like 85, 90 plus. And I feel like that's the strategy we're going to see from Sony. We're already kind of seeing that conversation happen with what happened with Days Gone. It sold quite well, but it didn't seem to be really critically well received. They have a prestige there, and I think Nintendo does as well. I don't know if that's actually even achievable with this quantity, if you can retain this level of quality. But I think that's the thing that is remaining here. They need to make sure when they come out with a game, that game is like the best of its kind. Or
to even make those games like an event almost, where like everyone's talking about them. Like whenever we have like a new Sony release, everyone's on Twitter talking about those games and how excited they are, because there's like a level of prestige to it where you kind of know. Like you can trust a Sony game, like essentially where you.
That's what I'm saying.
Sony releases something. I think that's what Xbox needs. So you brought up a good point there, but mine that I wanted to add on to it actually comes from Court Lalonde as well, that I wanted to tack in here, which is one I would have thought of even if he didn't ask this, but I wanted to bring it in here anyways. He asks, with titles like Crash and Spyro in the fold, do you think Xbox might try to get more kid-friendly games on Game Pass in the future? And I think that's the other thing they're really missing is like a lot of Microsoft's first-party titles that we've seen so far, besides something like Forza, are all mature-rated titles. They don't really have like a wide variety of games that appeal to all ages besides that, or Minecraft. I forgot about Minecraft, but Minecraft appeals to children as well. But beyond that, what other franchise do they really have? Which is why I think the Activision deal actually really helps that. It helps with to Court's point, Crash and Spyro in particular, could be a real big hit with kids. So I think that having more of that stuff on Game Pass would really kind of help flush things out as well. Because I've heard that from like other parents I know outside of this community, like my mom and my stepdad, he plays games, and there's a lot of other people that he knows that plays games. They're all, dads and stuff like that. And they're all like, yeah, Xbox is great, but like, I don't have anything to play with my kids on here. So I think that's a common sentiment that they need to, try and correct as well, beyond the quality thing that you just talked about, Sean. But what do you think?
I'm totally with you.
As a family person, Sean, what do you think?
No, I mean, it's a default for us to play Nintendo here. And like, there's definitely a quality to that. And I'm curious to know, like, it seems everybody says that's a no-brainer, and I'm not sure if it is. I don't know. Like I look at Sony again as like they've been very successful, and I guess they bought a couple things that maybe tackle the kid friendly thing. It seems to me that like Xbox doesn't really want to leave any stone unturned. So this definitely like it applies to that. I think mobile is actually a bigger entry level or entry point for family stuff. So then when people kind of grow up and they get their own money, they get their own house, they play console stuff and they play some of these things. So it's not like they're completely devoid of that sort of thing. But I would like to see with Spyro and Crash and maybe some of these other things. I don't know, like Kirby comes out all the time. You know, so if they're going to actually do this, then that style of game that's more like family friendly can come out a little bit more regularly. It doesn't need to be like a once every 5 years. And now you're lucky enough to get like a Spyro game. Like he just doesn't have the same gravitas. It's not a Mario. You know, he can be like, he can live as or these characters can live as a maybe C tier mascot kind of thing that like the core gamers don't really care about, but that it scratches an itch. It checks off a box.
Or it could be more like Skylanders, where Skylanders was
Skylanders,
in that
dude.
same realm as well, where even if they didn't do like a toy version of Skylanders, like I think just the idea of bringing that franchise back would be really interesting too.
Oh my God, dude. Yes. I mean, that, I don't know if, again, I feel like sometimes I'm repeating myself, but Skylanders with or without the toys, I think is possible. Even like somehow unlocking in the past games, you could just buy the digital version of the character. That would be great. Or if you actually have the toys, that would be awesome. If they could figure that out, man, Skylanders is really special. Like I'm a huge fan. Yeah,
for sure. All right, last question of the week comes to us from Joel Brooks at Joel, aka Falcon, who asks, what would you and Ryan do with $70 billion? So, Sean, if you got $70 billion instead of Activision, what would you do with it?
I have two, and I didn't even see this question come up, and this is literally like I have this answer locked. Number one, I would go to space. I would love to go to space. I'd go like as far as that takes me. If I can go to the moon and like check around that'd be pretty awesome. The other thing I would do with $70 billion, and I don't even know if I need the entirety of this amount of money. I would run my own version of Big Brother. I would build a house somewhere, set it up with cameras, and populate it with you guys, with members of the community, friends, and have you guys compete for $500,000 every summer. And I for my own personal enjoyment, is what Sean. I would do with that much money, man.
Good Lord.
An audience of
I can't. Yeah, we're just pawns in your twisted game. I see how it is.
Yeah. What would you do?
So first of all, I would build myself a Dr. Evil style evil lair with sharks with freaking laser beams and like inside like an active volcano and stuff like that.
Oh my God.
And then I would literally buy every video game that ever existed in physical form and have my own private library. I mean, you probably could. So yeah, I would own every single video game that ever existed and go and buy all the rare stuff and all the weird stuff and just play that, even though I would probably just, spend all weekend playing, some weird Japanese game that Sean's ever heard instead of playing something, meaningful.
Oh my gosh.
So that's what I would do. I would live like a supervillain because again, $70 billion is like Dr. Evil money. So you got to live up the life of Dr. Evil and do it that way. Although you never know, maybe you do like a Danganronpa style killing game, Sean, and just, that's just what
I wouldn't kill anybody. I just want them to compete and have fun challenges and backstab and, all that stuff.
I had to throw that wrinkle in there, Sean. That's what.
Yeah, nobody's dying. Nobody's dying.
Anyways, we got to go. But before we go, Sean, plugs go.
I probably should also say that I would like cure like world hunger or world like diseases and things like that. I probably would want to do more
please, this
humanitarian
is meant to be a selfish
stuff.
question, Sean.
But also go to space and do my own Big Brother. You can find me on Twitter and Twitch. Let me know what you guys think at Sean Capri, Sean like Connery, Capri like the pants. You can support us and get us closer to $70 billion at patreon.com/Yumi Capri.
Very nice, my friend. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can find us on Twitter at Yumi Caprice, on YouTube at youtube.com/Yumi Capri, and on podcast services around the globe. So for Sean Capri, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been episode 224 of the Xbox Drive, and we're out. Bye.
I just got a really great idea that I think we're going to add a new milestone to our Patreon at $70.6 billion. We'll do a Big Brother thing on patreon.com/Yumi Capri. Bye. The Xbox Drive is fueled by patrons at patreon.com/Yumi Capri. And from the bottom of my heart, I am so grateful to the nearly 70 patrons who support us each and every month. With special thanks to our Capremium producers, Dallas Ford, Lee Navarro, the fearless leader of the Phoenix Overdrive Extra Life team, and Jonathan Brown, the man behind the music on the Xbox Drive and the Nintendo Drive. You can support Jonathan Brown at youtube.com/GamingPurpleMonkey. Our platinum producers, Robbie Bobby Miller and Trucker Sloth, and all of our gold members, Argo, Benji Kong, Brendan Myers, Dallas Robbins, Dano, Emily O'Kelly, Foolish Fuji, Heather Boney, James Johnson, Dr. Doom, Joel Brooks, Jose Jimenez, Mac Time, Marcus O'Neill, Mr. and Mrs. Nasty Boots, RJ Kern, Skinny Matt, and Xavier Reyes. If you'd like to support this show, go to patreon.com/YumiCapri and choose the Patreon tier that works for you.